12 Angry Men is often praised as one of the greatest films of all time, but behind its serious courtroom setting lies a treasure chest of strange, surprising, and downright bizarre facts. Did you know this legendary movie was shot in less than a month, on a shoestring budget, and almost nobody cared about it when it first came out? How does a film that flopped at theaters end up on every greatest movies list decades later? Stick around, because the truth about 12 Angry Men is weirder than the fiction. The entire film was almost never made. Here's a shocker. The movie that every film school now worships almost didn't happen. Why? Because studio executives thought it was too boring. Think about it. 12 guys sitting in a single room, sweating, arguing, and not even throwing a single punch. In an era when audiences wanted giant epics like The Ten Commandments or explosive westerns, 12 Angry Men looked like a TV stage play that would put people to sleep. United Artists only reluctantly agreed to back the project after Henry Fonda and writer Reginald Rose promised to keep costs extremely low. They weren't kidding. The budget was so tight, even simple production choices had to be stripped down to the bare minimum. And yet, that boring setup turned into one of the most gripping pieces of cinema ever made. Ironically, the very thing that executives thought would kill the movie, the single room, the lack of action, became its superpower. It created claustrophobia, tension, and a pressure cooker atmosphere that action films can only dream of. Imagine if the suits had gotten their way and canceled it. The film world would have lost a masterpiece. Sometimes what looks boring on paper ends up rewriting the rules of storytelling. Henry Fonda only produced one movie, this one. Henry Fonda was one of Hollywood's most respected actors, but he wasn't exactly interested in the behind-the-scenes chaos of producing. He made just one exception: 12 Angry Men. Fonda loved Reginald Rose's teleplay so much that he personally championed it and put up money to make it happen. This was a huge risk. If the movie bombed, and remember, many thought it would, Fonda's name would be tied to a disaster. The funny part? He hated producing. He later admitted that the endless meetings, negotiations, and budgeting drove him insane. Fonda said he preferred focusing on acting rather than paperwork and politics. So after 12 Angry Men, he swore never to produce again. Think about that. This one gamble was his first and last ride as a producer. Luckily for us, his one-time leap into producing gave the world a film that has lasted generations. Without Fonda's personal drive, there's a good chance 12 Angry Men would have stayed just another forgotten TV drama. Instead, his gamble gave it the big screen life it deserved. And while Fonda hated the job, history remembers him as not just the star, but the man who made the movie possible. It was shot in just 21 days. 21 days. That's all it took to shoot one of the greatest courtroom dramas of all time. To put it into perspective, some modern blockbusters take 200 days just to get the action sequences right. Sidney Lumet, a first-time movie director at the time, worked like a machine. He came from television and theater, where quick turnarounds were the norm, so he treated 12 Angry Men the same way: rehearse like crazy, then shoot fast. The cast spent 2 weeks in a rehearsal room running the script over and over until every line flowed naturally. By the time the cameras rolled, the actors were so in sync that they could nail entire scenes in a single take. That's why the movie feels so raw and natural. You're not watching men acting. You're watching men argue, sweat, and unravel in real time. And here's the kicker. That intense schedule actually boosted the tension. With everyone trapped on set together, tempers occasionally flared, adding extra authenticity to the bickering on screen. By wrapping in just 3 weeks, Lumet not only saved money, but also captured lightning in a bottle. The film's pacing, its claustrophobic energy, and its stripped-down intensity all owe something to that mad 3-week dash. The budget was tiny, only $350,000 to $400,000. Let's be honest. Hollywood usually throws buckets of money at movies, even in the 1950s. But 12 Angry Men? It was made for what would barely cover catering on a blockbuster today, somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000. Even by the standards of the era, that was peanuts. Because of the low budget, there were no elaborate sets, no fancy costumes, and no crowd-pleasing stunts. Almost the entire film takes place in one claustrophobic jury room, with just a few quick shots outside. The actors wore ordinary suits, and the props could fit into a small storage closet. But instead of being a weakness, the low budget forced Lumet and his crew to get creative. They leaned on camera movement, lighting, and tight editing to create suspense rather than relying on spectacle. The result? A masterclass in how to do more with less. In fact, that tiny budget may be why the film still feels timeless. There's nothing flashy to date it. No over-the-top special effects or gimmicks. Just pure human drama. And when you realize how little money went into it, the achievement becomes even stranger and more impressive. It's proof that brilliance doesn't need a fat wallet, just the right vision. The film actually flopped at theaters. Here's the weirdest twist of all. 12 Angry Men wasn't a box office smash. In fact, it barely made an impression when it was first released in 1957. Sure, it covered its costs, but it wasn't pulling in the kind of numbers that studios bragged about. It earned around $1 million, which sounds decent, but compared to the mega hits of the time, that was pocket change. The problem was timing. Audiences in the late 1950s were flocking to cinemas for colorful musicals, sweeping historical epics, or gritty westerns. A black-and-white chamber piece about jurors arguing in a hot room didn't exactly scream Saturday night entertainment. Critics respected it, but the general audience shrugged. But here's where the story flips. When television became a household staple in America, 12 Angry Men found new life. Its intimate setting and dialogue-heavy script translated perfectly to the small screen. Suddenly, people were discovering the film in living rooms, and its reputation grew. Over time, reruns, school screenings, and international adaptations transformed what was once a modest hit into a global classic. It's a strange irony. A movie that underperformed at the box office ended up becoming one of the most beloved and studied films in cinema history. Sometimes the crowd misses greatness the first time around, but history eventually catches up. The camera angles were designed to make you claustrophobic. From the start, Sidney Lumet knew he had a problem. How do you keep audiences glued to their seats when 12 men are sitting around a table doing nothing but talking? The answer was sneaky camera work. Lumet and cinematographer Boris Kaufman used a strategy that's almost invisible to the eye, but powerful in effect. At the beginning of the movie, the camera sits higher and further away, giving you a sense of space. But as the arguments get more heated, the lens slowly creeps lower and tighter, pressing closer into the actors' faces. By the end, the camera is shooting upward, making the ceiling feel lower and the room feel like a pressure cooker. You may not consciously notice it, but your body does. It makes you feel trapped right alongside the jurors, squirming as the air gets heavier and the tempers rise. That's why the movie never feels boring. It's designed to squeeze you emotionally with every frame. Lumet later admitted this was a deliberate psychological trick. He wanted the audience to experience the same discomfort the jurors felt, so the shifting camera angles became a silent character in the room. It's one of the weirdest and smartest uses of cinematography in film history, taking a static script and making it pulse with tension. No names, only numbers. If you've ever watched the movie closely, you'll notice something odd. The jurors don't have names. For nearly the entire film, they're referred to only by numbers. Juror 3, Juror 8, Juror 10. These men are stripped of identity, status, and backstory. Why? Because in a jury room, none of that is supposed to matter. Everyone is supposed to be equal, just 12 strangers deciding a life or death case. It's a bold narrative choice, and one that makes the film feel strangely universal. You can project anyone you want onto those men, your neighbor, your coworker, even yourself. The anonymity also intensifies the themes of prejudice. Without names or backgrounds, the biases we see on screen reflect the raw prejudices of society at large rather than personal grudges. Here's the kicker. It's only in the final moments of the film, after the verdict, that two jurors casually exchange names. It's almost jarring, like suddenly remembering these people are real individuals after all. That little touch drives home the idea that justice shouldn't be about personal identity, but about fairness. It's one of those blink and you'll miss it details that makes the film stick in your mind. A sweat trick, literally. One of the film's most memorable details is how sweaty everyone looks. You can practically feel the heat radiating off the screen. But how did Lumet pull it off? The answer is both practical and hilarious. The set was deliberately overlit with heavy studio lamps, which turned the jury room into an actual sauna. The crew even cranked up the temperature to make the actors genuinely uncomfortable. On top of that, stagehands spritzed the actors with water bottles to keep the illusion of dripping sweat going throughout the shoot. Makeup teams dabbed and reapplied shine between takes, making sure every bead of sweat caught the light. The effect was so convincing that audiences often comment on how suffocating the film feels. And here's the funny part. Some of the actors got so hot that they began fainting during long takes. The production pushed them physically, which only added to the sense of realism. When you see Juror 7 wiping his brow in frustration, or Juror 3 pounding the table with sweat running down his face, that's not acting, it's survival. The sweat became its own character in the film, reminding us that justice doesn't happen in pristine courtrooms, but in messy, uncomfortable human spaces. One actor collapsed on set. The intense conditions of the shoot weren't just cinematic tricks, they took a toll on the cast. Lee J. Cobb, who played the explosive Juror 3, was so drained by the endless rehearsals, suffocating heat, and emotionally heavy scenes that he reportedly collapsed during production. Cobb's character is the loudest, most stubborn, and most aggressive juror in the room, and carrying that emotional intensity day after day was brutal. Cobb was a powerhouse actor, known for giving everything he had to a role. But the physical and mental strain of 12 Angry Men pushed him to his limit. It's said that after fainting, he was revived, dusted off, and went right back to filming. That kind of grit is part of why his performance is still remembered as one of the most powerful in cinema. Ironically, Cobb's collapse only adds to the legend of the movie. It shows how far the actors were willing to go for authenticity. The sweat, the shouting, the pounding fists. It wasn't just great acting, it was lived in reality. Watching the movie now, you can almost sense the exhaustion behind his eyes, and it makes Juror 3's eventual breakdown at the end feel all the more real. The script was born in a real jury room. Here's where it all started. Reginald Rose, the man who wrote 12 Angry Men, didn't just dream it up. He lived it. In 1954, Rose was called for jury duty on a manslaughter case. Inside that cramped room, he experienced the heated arguments, clashing personalities, and moral weight of deciding another person's fate. The intensity stuck with him. Rose went home and turned his experience into a 1-hour television play. That teleplay became such a hit that it laid the foundation for the feature film 3 years later. Rose admitted that while he fictionalized much of it, the raw emotions and tensions were very real. He said the jury room felt like a battlefield, where logic and prejudice collided head-on. What's strange is how rare it was at the time to set a whole story in such a confined space. But Rose's gamble paid off. Instead of sprawling sets and melodrama, he delivered a script that stripped everything down to dialogue and character conflict. That's why the movie still feels fresh today, because it's rooted in something painfully real. Without Rose's stint on jury duty, one of the greatest scripts in American cinema might never have existed. It was Sidney Lumet's film debut. Believe it or not, 12 Angry Men was Sidney Lumet's very first feature film. He was just 33 years old, a rising talent from television and theater, and suddenly handed the reins of a movie that could easily sink his career before it even started. That's pressure. Yet somehow, Lumet turned what could have been a dull chamber piece into one of the most riveting debut films in cinema history. Lumet's secret weapon was his theater background. Instead of treating the film like a big Hollywood spectacle, he staged it almost like a play. He demanded weeks of rehearsals with his cast before the cameras rolled, something unusual at the time. Every pause, every stare, every shift in body language was worked out in advance. By the time filming began, the actors moved like a well-oiled machine, ready to erupt with authentic emotion. It's rare for a first-time director to create a film that critics and audiences are still dissecting 60 years later. But Lumet did just that. He went on to direct classics like Dog Day Afternoon and Network. But 12 Angry Men remains the film that announced his arrival. It's a strange twist of history that his debut still outshines many directors' entire careers. It's been remade in at least 7 countries. How powerful is 12 Angry Men? Powerful enough to be remade across the globe, in completely different languages and cultures, yet still resonate with audiences. The first major remake was in Germany in 1963, followed by adaptations in Norway, India, Japan, Russia, France, and even China. Each version put its own cultural spin on the story while keeping the core intact: 12 people wrestling with justice inside a room. One of the most celebrated foreign versions is the Hindi film Ek Ruka Hua Faisla from 1986. It's widely regarded as a masterpiece of Indian cinema, showing how universal the story really is. Russian director Nikita Mikhalkov remade it in 2007, adding unique cultural commentary while still paying homage to the original. What's fascinating is that the central theme, prejudice, justice, doubt, translates perfectly across borders. It doesn't matter if the accused is American, Indian, Russian, or French. The debate over fairness and truth hits home everywhere. That's why 12 Angry Men has become less of a movie and more of a global language for exploring human bias and morality. The boy's ethnicity was deliberately ambiguous. In the film, the accused teenager is never given a clear background. There are hints that he might be Puerto Rican, but it's never confirmed. Why would the filmmakers leave that detail vague? Simple. It forces the audience to focus on the jurors' prejudices rather than the boy's identity. You're watching 12 men project their biases onto someone they don't really know, which makes the story sting even harder. This choice also makes the film timeless. By leaving the boy's ethnicity open, every generation of viewers brings its own social tensions into the story. In the 1950s, audiences may have thought about Puerto Rican immigrants. Later adaptations shifted focus depending on the local context, whether that meant highlighting racism, class bias, or nationalism. It's a brilliant trick. By not telling you exactly who the boy is, the story becomes about everyone. He could represent any marginalized group, any community judged unfairly. That's why the debates in the jury room still feel relevant decades later. Prejudice evolves, but the danger of judging people by assumptions remains the same. The editing is shockingly sparse. If you're used to modern movies, you might be surprised at how slowly 12 Angry Men cuts between shots. That's not sloppy editing, it's a deliberate choice. At the start of the film, shots run long, sometimes holding on a single actor for minutes. It creates a sense of realism, as though you're sitting in that jury room with no escape. As the film progresses, the editing slowly picks up speed. Cuts become faster and more frequent, mirroring the rising tension of the arguments. By the time the jurors are yelling over each other, the editing feels rapid fire, creating the illusion of chaos. Lumet basically weaponized editing to manipulate the audience's emotions. Here's the weird part. There are very few edits in the first half of the movie, which was considered unusual for the time. Most directors would have cut frequently to keep things interesting. But Lumet trusted the material and his actors. He let the camera linger, forcing you to stew in the discomfort. It was a risky move, but it worked. That slow build is part of what makes the film so suspenseful. It was almost just a forgotten TV drama. Before it was a film, 12 Angry Men started as a one-hour television play in 1954. And honestly, if things had gone differently, that's where the story might have ended. Just another solid but forgotten live TV broadcast. It was Henry Fonda's passion for the story that pushed it into theaters. Without him, we might not even be talking about it today. The original TV version aired on Studio One, a popular anthology series. It was well received, but considered just another week's entertainment in the golden age of live television. But when Fonda saw the potential, he fought to bring it to the big screen. He knew the script had the bones of something greater, and he wasn't wrong. It's weird to think about. One of the most influential films in history nearly stayed a footnote in TV history. Without that leap from small screen to big screen, film schools wouldn't teach it, directors wouldn't cite it, and generations of audiences wouldn't be quoting it. Sometimes greatness hangs by a thread, and in this case, that thread was one actor's persistence. So there you have it, 12 Angry Men, the film that was too boring to make, too cheap to matter, and too small to succeed, until it rewrote film history. From sweaty actors fainting on set to international remakes in 7 different countries, the movie is packed with strange, fascinating details you'd never expect. Which of these weird facts surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. After all, if a boring jury movie can turn into a masterpiece, imagine what other underdogs we'll uncover next.